Throughout history, man has communicated through stories. In his seminal work, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, American mythologist Joseph Campbell outlined his theory of the monomyth, the hero's journey that is the cornerstone of stories and legends since before recorded time. His work builds on the Jungian concept of the archetype, a symbol, theme, setting, or character type that recurs in different times and places in myth, so frequently or prominently as to suggest that it embodies some essential element of universal human experience. Stories are powerful tools to help us make sense of the world, and archetypes are a kind of scaffold for constructing them. Stories are a kind of mental model. We fit work, religion, family, and even the things we buy into this model. We craft a narrative about ourselves and our world that rationalizes all these elements together. This narrative and the key characters within it are essential to who we are. The products we use are either critical elements of this story or merely scenery. Products with strong brands are likely to be more tightly woven into our story.
Right now, it's everything. Every brand has embraced storytelling. They understand that if I can't tell a good story, I'm not going to capture somebody's attention. I've lost them. And I think that's partly what's driving that is through television, through Netflix, through that more extended format where you can tell a story across 16, 20 episodes. Consumers are absolutely now demanding that their brands engaged in a story. Very similar to that. But it's because of that mentality that the characters of the brands have to be developed to the same level that the characters are within those Netflix series. They've become accustomed to that deep dive. They learn a little bit more about those characters every single episode that they watch it. It's like they're building on it, building on it, building on it. So if brands just stop and don't keep developing it deeper, they're going to lose the interest of the consumers that they want to attract. So you can't stop.
In The Brand Gap, Marty Neumeier suggests that a brand isn't what you, the brand, say it is, it's what they, the consumer, say it is. Noah Hawley defined the brand as part art, part science, the difference between a bottle of soda and a bottle of Coke, the intangible yet visceral impact of a person's subjective experience with the product, the personal memories and cultural associations that orbit around it.
Brand is all about delivering an experience for the customer. A lot of people like to frame up branding as the visuals, focusing on the logo, but in my opinion, it's more about a brand has a singular task. It's to deliver an experience to their customer. So everything that they bring to the table that enhances that experience is part of their brand.
Much has been written in scholarly journals and popular business books about the power and value of branding and storytelling in marketing. David Schmid and Frank Huber noted that the emotional connections between consumers and brands are associated with a myriad of immediately profitable outcomes for marketers, such as a greater brand preference, an increased willingness to pay a price premium, brand loyalty and commitment, positive word of mouth, resistance to negative information, forgiveness of brand failures, and brand advocacy. This leaves brand managers and marketers with the task of identifying the best branding strategies to accelerate those benefits. So how does an organization create a brand that becomes iconic and creates passion and preference? In their book, The Hero and the Outlaw, Margaret Mark and Carol Peterson suggest that it's through the application of archetypes. They describe 12 brand archetypes drawn from the work of psychologist Carl Jung, which provide a way for brands to conceptualize their message, their position, and their tone.
For me, an archetype more is about defining the role of the brand as far as it pertains to branding. What is the job that we're going to define for our brand? The consumer's always the hero, right? I mean, they should be. That's the brand is just helping walk that hero through the journey. The consumer's got to be the hero. For me, the singular role of the archetype is to better define the role that the brand needs to play within the relationship with the customer.
In The Hero and the Outlaw, Pearson and Mark describe a framework of archetypes based on the work of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell. Their framework leverages the power of myth in storytelling. Jung identified archetypes as embodying beliefs, ideas, and images inherited unconsciously and collectively, producing myth and religion. Campbell built on Jung's work to identify a common narrative framework he called the hero's journey. While Jung described many archetypes, Campbell reduced the list to 8 that were critical to his theory of the monomyth. His list included the hero, mentor, ally, herald, trickster, shapeshifter, guardian, and shadow. In mythic storytelling, the hero is the central character, the protagonist with whom the reader or viewer relates. The other 7 archetypes are characters who assist or oppose the hero on his quest. Campbell's theory focuses on the narrative elements of the story rather than the personality of the archetypes. Pearson and Mark's approach focuses on the different types of personality and the function brands exert in consumers' lives. They proposed 12 archetypes drawn from Jung's work, including the innocent, the explorer, the sage, the hero, the outlaw, the magician, the regular guy or girl, the lover, the jester, the caregiver, the creator, and the ruler. These archetypes describe how the brand helps the hero consumer on their journey. This approach marks a clear difference in the use of archetypes in narrative storytelling and branding. In storytelling, the hero is the central character. In branding, the consumer is the hero, and the brand fulfills the role of ally, mentor, herald, or guardian, but the brand may embody the characteristics of any of the 12 branding archetypes. Using archetypes in storytelling has long been the backbone of books and films. Successful films like Star Wars or the James Bond franchise make use of archetypes and the hero's journey because this structure resonates with audiences. Successful marketers use these same structures to strengthen their brands. They use these archetypes in powerful ways to create memorable brands through consistency in messaging, tone of voice, and relationship to the consumer.
The great thing about it is an archetype will get all of the stakeholders who are involved in the brand. It starts to get them aligned and understanding the role of the brand all on a singular path. It starts to align how they look at the brand, how they talk about the brand. It starts to make it universal amongst the stakeholders on how they're going to build this experience with the customer. So from that standpoint, it helps everybody focus, which is great. That's part of what has to happen within branding is you got to start internally to get all those stakeholders aligned so that everybody's preaching to the audience in the same way, with the same content, the same visuals, because branding, fundamentally is all about consistency to deliver that universal experience that customer ultimately wants.
There are challenges, however, to employing archetypes in this way. According to Kevin Keller, writing in the Journal of Consumer Research, there are cognitive problems that can arise when brands adopt a more emotional approach to consumer engagement. These include issues of compatibility, declining love, and polarization. These are the same kinds of problems that can happen in any interpersonal relationship. There are also problems of practical application. Some marketers use archetypes without really understanding how they work or how to define a brand's archetype.
I don't think they understand them, A. And B, I think just from a resource standpoint, to really get into archetypes correctly, it requires a lot of time, a lot of resources, and I just don't know that a lot of management level understand or want to put that investment into utilizing archetypes to help better define the brand.
This lack of understanding leads some marketers to fall into the trap of employing stereotypes instead of archetypes. Stereotypes are simplistic caricatures that often resort to common negative connotations. Archetypes, on the other hand, represent an eternal truth that transcends time, place, culture, gender, and age.
Within archetypes, there's a tendency, I would think, with marketers to go to this stereotypical space. It's about creating this stereotype that everybody understands. They borrow from their past experience with that type of role, and they bring a lot of that high level, again, broad brush to that archetype, and that's just, there's a missed opportunity there. What should happen within that archetype is intentionally avoid creating a stereotype. If you start to get into the stereotypical space, it's wrong. I've got a great example for this, and it's like, if you're familiar with the Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper is a scientist. So the tendency would be to, oh, he's a scientist. He's nerdy, he probably wears a lab coat, he is socially awkward, that's just real stereotypical sciencey type stuff. But within the character development that the show has brought to him, they've brought this depth into his character. So he's got obsessive compulsive. He's got this idiosyncrasy where he's got to sit on a certain space on the couch.
That's where I sit. In the winter, that seat is close enough to the radiator to remain warm, and yet not so close as to cause perspiration. It faces the television at an angle that is neither direct, thus discouraging conversation, nor so far wide as to create a parallax distortion. I could go on, but...
These are all things that are starting to build his character to have this depth to it that is way beyond this high-level stereotype. That entire show is a bunch of scientists, but every single one of them has that distinctive character that draws you to them for different reasons. And it's that interplay of all of them together that creates, I would call it, that higher level category of scientists. Yep, they all have enough similarity that pulls them together, but the individuality of them makes the consumer, me who watches the show, I get drawn into those characters and how they interact, and it's just like, that's what keeps me coming back. Stereotypes are boring, If you get into that depth of that character, archetypes can be interesting. It's like, oh, you know what, that's odd, but it's interesting. I want to engage more with this person because they seem real, not because they seem like some facade of a character that I'm supposed to interact with a certain way. That's where marketers go wrong, is they don't spend the time to get into that depth of nuance that makes their brand interesting and different and have people want to engage with them.
Even when marketers avoid the stereotype trap, they can still struggle with consistently applying the archetype to their brand.
Back to an actor, if you defined an actor's role, the actor themselves can start to build in that depth to their character that draws you in. The brands have a responsibility to continue to do that, to draw those customers back. And if they don't do it, it's short-lived. So that's for me exactly why they can't switch archetypes. If you've been spending time building that character deeper, you can't shift it to another character. That's like taking a series where you've gotten accustomed to one of those key characters and they swap them out for somebody else. How many times does that work? Very rarely.
There are occasions, however, when a brand has to change with the times.
Gillette went through a redefining campaign January of last year because of the Me Too movement. They recognized that their brand was too far entrenched in a very chauvinistic mindset. They started out where their messaging was all about the reason you shave is to get women to jump all over you and So they were really treating women as objects at that point, where they shifted from that very machismo, we'll call it the lover archetype. They shifted from that into this reformer archetype. So within their campaign, they even introduced the new campaign where they recognized and embraced that what they had been doing was wrong. They opened the commercial with a woman kissing a man on the cheek because he had just shaved, and they have these kids tearing through that image, and they start talking about how the old mindset was, boys will be boys. It's very much this chauvinistic attitude that they're showing society has as they define the gender roles. And by the end of the commercial, it takes their tagline, which is the best a man can get, and they question it to, is this the best a man can get? So it's more about now, no, we've taken the wrong position. We need to reform that position and start to teach our boys that it's not acceptable to take those mindsets that were acceptable in the past. We need to shift that conversation, and they do that through this reformer role.
Gillette's pivot to a reformer archetype highlights one of the limitations of the original 12 archetypes as defined by Pearson and Marx in The Hero and the Outlaw. The reformer archetype doesn't exist in their list. The closest option is the outlaw. While a limited set of archetypes is more straightforward to use, it lacks the opportunity for nuance. If, as Kevin Keller claims, brand intangibles play an increasingly important role in differentiation, then a broader palette of archetypes would be a valuable asset for creating nuance that allows for real differentiation.
The biggest limitation is that because it works at such a high level, it's difficult to get into those nuances that build that brand distinction. Brands also have a task of differentiating themselves amongst their competition. So when you just look at the archetypes as a big broad brush, it's more difficult to get into those nuances that differentiate you from everybody else. So that's something that once you've identified the archetype, there's a lot more work that needs to be done.
Brand strategists Margaret Hartwell and Joshua Chen faced the same challenge in their practice, so they created the Archetypes in Branding Toolkit, which expands Pearson and Mark's original group into 12 sets of 5, providing a greater opportunity for nuance while defining a brand. The Outlaw, which they renamed the Rebel, was divided into 5 subtypes: the Rebel, the Activist, the Gambler, the Maverick, and the Reformer.
So rather than having to paint with that broad brush, now you can get into the quirkiness that you might have within your brand, or you can explore maybe some tertiary spaces within your brand across the 60, and it allows the internal stakeholders to have some debate over whether or not they're more like this particular archetype or this particular archetype or this particular archetype underneath this broader umbrella. So it allows that nuance that is absolutely super important within building that distinction within your brand. The biggest challenge is just trying to get all of your stakeholders aligned. With that much choice and with that much nuance, it might be trickier to have everybody focus and agree that, yep, this is the direction that we want to head, or this is the experience that we want to deliver, rather than where it's more broad and you have fewer choices. It'd be easier for them to go, yeah, this one sounds like it's the best, let's start here.
Archetypes can be a powerful tool for marketers when used well. There are some limitations, but new tools like the Archetypes and Branding Toolkit can go a long way to helping find the right archetype for your brand.
My advice would be dig deep, find those authentic, the quirkiness that is authentic. That's where the interest lies. It's like, start at that high level and then just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper but do that in an authentic space. Don't try to wedge a round peg into a square hole because you think that's what the consumers are going to want. Identify those things that are authentically part of your brand, even if they might come across as somewhat negative. You can utilize that to help build the authenticity into who your brand is. And embrace those and get the consumers to understand that it's not a negative. It's just a part of what the foundation of your brand is, and then show them how that makes you unique and distinctive, and that distinction is actually a positive and not a negative.
For more information on using archetypes with your brand, check out The Hero and the Outlaw and the Archetypes and Branding Toolkit. Both are available on Amazon.